Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Activist News. We are certainly living in some unusual times, and every single day the narrative just gets more and more strange. When I usually make a video, it generally flows with a certain topic or some recent news. So that usually means I go digging for some articles and look around at what people are saying. But every now and then, like in this video, I just talk about something I find interesting. Now that's not to say that there hasn't been interesting developments in the news lately, because there has been. There's been another apparent shooting in the States and some interesting election results in Italy. But none of it really jumps out at me, and given the nature of the corporate-controlled and Jewish-controlled media, it's hard to distinguish what news is out there for the sake of shaping the narrative and what news is just news. So for this video, I wanted to focus on a couple of items that have a mutual link, which is the importance of the LGBTQ agenda being pushed by the international communists and Jewish interest groups. Now, I was recently watching a video that someone had sent to me which shows what happens when real scientists attempt to talk about gender differences in human beings from a biological perspective at an American university. And they did so without any of the New Age liberal pseudoscientific bullshit attached to it. Now, these are real scientists who are talking about real science at Portland State University. Now, don't get me wrong, I also know that a lot of modern science is sponsored by nefarious corporate groups, and there is indeed an agenda to kill theology. But all that aside, what's important here is there are certainly differences between a man and a woman that we just can't ignore. It's just common sense. And there are also a lot of scientists who are very unapologetic about the fact that gender is not abstract and fluid. Now, the students who were more left-leaning decided to show a sign of solidarity with their communist ideology and stage a walkout out of the conversation, as they usually do. Some of them went as far as to prevent other people from listening to the lecture. They did this by yelling over the speaker and unplugging the audio equipment, even attempting to damage it. Now, eventually security was called in and the lecture was able to continue on as planned. But what this shows is an inability for the far left to allow conversation on certain topics. And it really plays a hand into the larger censorship agenda that's being played out across social media as we speak. In recent history, it's generally been the left who have had the delight of calling non-lefties unscientific, due to the right being less secular-minded and more inclined to oppose things like, say, global warming. But what we are seeing now is an inability of the left to accept certain scientific facts, which is a huge hypocrisy, even for them. But what it also reveals is just how important the LGBTQ agenda is for the far left and their Jewish financiers. Some of the protesting students went as far to call the female lecturer a Nazi, a common theme that gays and transgenders share with the Jewish community is a sense of eternal victimhood. It's through this guise that appealing to one's sense of distorted morality really pays off. It's almost as if the cultural editors of society today have not given science enough chance to catch up to the official narrative. Now, what I'm talking about might make a little bit more sense when you consider this. A couple of days ago at the Plaza in New York City, the World Values Network hosted its 6th annual Champions of Jewish Values International Awards Gala, honouring men and women who stand up for human rights, fight genocide, and promote human dignity. Obviously, while completely ignoring Palestine. A principal honoree and keynote speaker was none other than Caitlyn Jenner, an icon in the LGBTQ community and a strong supporter of the State of Israel, who received their Champions of Israel and LGBTQ Rights Award. Let's keep in mind that this Israel-loving ex-athlete was named Woman of the Year before she had even had surgery by the Jewish-run media. So it should come as no surprise how these two narratives can come together in the Hegelian dialectic, Zionism and transsexualism. While they may seem like opposite sides of the political spectrum, they come together nicely when it comes to serving Jewish interests, particularly in the West.
A very interesting evening. I didn't know quite how it would affect me until I was downstairs earlier this evening. I have been touched by the Jewish community on a few occasions throughout my life. That has had a really big impact on me and the person I think that I am today. I grew up a Christian church. The first impact was my father. This is always tough to talk about.
Caitlyn Jenner demonstrates how Jews are at the forefront of gay liberation. This is important as it shows how the international communists work, constantly trying to win the moral hierarchy based on pseudo-scientific lies. This is why the LGBTQ is primarily financed by Jewish interest groups, as the broader homosexual agenda in the West serves Jewish interests, especially when you look into things like the Kalergi Plan and the destruction of Europe.
William Hugh Jenner landed on Omaha Beach. 5th Ranger Battalion, the first boat's on. Somehow, he survived through World War II. He even said on his deathbed many, many years later, he says, "I should have died a long time ago. I had a great life." But his troops, the 5th Ranger Battalion, were the first ones into this Buchenwald. When I was a young boy, I remember he took some pictures of railroad cars stacked 20 feet high with bodies. And as a young boy, I couldn't figure out why would anybody do that. And even to this day, it always affected me that my dad, who was only 23 years old, had to see something like that. That was the first time. The second time was many, many years later, when again I was touched by what happened to Israel. I went to the 1972 Olympic Games, my first Olympics. I was 22. Nobody ever expected me to make it on the team. I certainly never even expected to either, but boom, there I was. I got 3rd place at the trials, and I went to Munich. Woke up that morning, and a guy named Steve Prefontaine, who unfortunately we lost in a car accident a few years later, came in my room and he said, "Hey, something's going on outside." He says, "I don't know what it is, but something's going on." I went to the place where we eat at the Commons, came back out and found out that terrorists had came in and took over the Israeli athletes. I really didn't know at that time. I was 22. I didn't know what the conflicts were, what the issues that the Jewish community is going through. And so I was with a group of guys, and they said, "You know, there's a place you can see what's going on." The Puerto Rican team had their rooms were right next to what was going on. So they said, "Come on up." We went up, and we crawled out on our knees out onto the porch.
See, Caitlyn Jenner is trying to latch on to people's sense of morality through this eternal victimhood. You see, when Germany released the 3 Black September guerrillas who survived the Munich massacre after a fabricated plane hijacking, Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir then launched a secret operation known by some as the Wrath of God, to hunt and kill those responsible for the Munich massacre. And let's just say that they well and truly overplayed that hand. And this is said to have been carried out by Palestinian terrorists. This act is now believed by many, however, to have been a controlled operation by Israeli intelligence to set up the circumstances in which Operation Wrath of God, their terrorist ambitions, already previously drafted, could be put into full effect.
And I looked across the walkway, and there, standing in the doorway, was that very famous picture of that guy in the hat holding, I think it was a rifle. And so, of course, I ducked and went back in. I really have been affected by a lot of those things that happen throughout my life. And it's always been very personal. Since then, I live in Los Angeles. I go to a lot of Jewish weddings, by far the most fun weddings to go to. Let's hear it for that. Been to many bar mitzvahs, so as I was downstairs and watching, what I really like about the Jewish community is how they are so committed to family.
Now, I'm not going to play the full video, but if you wanted to check it out and watch the rest of it for yourself, that's fine. Not much really needs to be said about this speech, however. I've pretty much said it already. It's typical, really. What I will say is, don't be deceived by the left and right paradigm, and pay attention to what's going on, because both sides are controlled by the same people. Before I wrap things up, I also wanted to mention that Nick Spiro is currently in the ICU fighting for his life. I believe he got pneumonia or something like that, but don't quote me on that because it could be wrong. I've actually been hoping to get him on the show for some time now, but yeah, we kind of fell out of contact, and I recently got in contact with a mutual friend who gave me the bad news. This was only yesterday. So thoughts and prayers are with him. Hopefully everything's okay. And yeah, be sure to jump over to his channel, send him some love, wish him well, and all of that. Also, if you were wondering what happened to the Discord channel we had, it was deleted by Discord staff. Along with a bunch of profiles as well. They just terminated a bunch of profiles. Just another example of censorship taking place when the left can't control the narrative by calling everyone a Nazi. And this is what I'm talking about. Controlling this narrative, and if they can't control it, they censor you. And on that note, folks, I want to thank you for watching the video. Please be sure to give me your feedback in the comment section below and give us a thumbs up. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. If you want to support us on Patreon or find us somewhere else, check the description below for links. And until next time, folks, peace. Take care.